Hello, Saudi Arabia, NATO member Turkey, and nuclear-armed Pakistan laid down a marker when they signed earlier this month a mutual defense pact that defines an attack on one signatory as an attack on all. The signing signaled Gulf states' accelerated efforts to diversify the region's security architecture and to reduce, rather than replace, anytime soon, a U.S. defense umbrella that has proven to be unreliable at best and as much a liability as an asset at worst, but even so, irreplaceable. The Gulf states' quest for diversification preceded the Iran war, but has gained urgency since the February 28 U.S. Israeli attack on Iran, the closure of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, and the Yemeni Houthi targeting of Saudi-related shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb waterway and the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia announced, days before the signing of the Defense Pact, the creation of a Saudi-led 14-nation maritime coalition to protect shipping in the Red Sea. Beyond Turkey and Pakistan, the coalition includes Egypt, Bangladesh, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, Sudan, Djibouti, Somalia, Yemen, and the Comoros. Conspicuously absent are the United States and Europe, which depends on Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea for 40% of its trade, as well as Oman, which has maintained channels of communication with the Houthis, and the United Arab Emirates because of its strained relations with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia sees the maritime coalition and the Defense Pact as a way of framing Iranian disruption of freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and Houthi attacks on shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb waterway and the Red Sea as global, not just Saudi issues. Moreover, the coalition allows Saudi Arabia to position the Red Sea as an integrated strategic theater rather than a region hosting separate crises in Yemen, Sudan, and the Horn of Africa. The coalition and the pact change the Middle East and the Horn of Africa's lay of the land, even if the pact may not have an immediate impact on engagement of its signatories in ongoing conflicts, such as the escalating Houthi-Saudi hostilities, or on potential future clashes between, for example, Pakistan and India, or Turkey and Israel. With Pakistan's participation, the agreement reaffirmed the increasingly popular notion of a greater Middle East that stretches into South Asia. By doing so, it theoretically deprives Israel of its undeclared status as the region's only nuclear power, even if Pakistan, the primary mediator between the United States and Iran, is not about to deploy nuclear weapons to either Saudi Arabia or Turkey. While positioned as a defensive rather than an offensive mechanism, the pact also signaled an end to pre-war efforts by regional powers to freeze their differences with Iran in favor of focusing on areas of potential cooperation. The notion that differences could be frozen reached a high point in 2023 when Saudi Arabia and Iran re-established diplomatic relations under Chinese auspices. Instead, the tripartite pact suggests a return to the late 2010s and early 2020s, when Gulf states and Iran foregrounded their disputes and formed informal regional blocs. Saudi Arabia broke off relations with Iran in 2016, when a mob ransacked the kingdom's embassy in Tehran, following the execution of a prominent Saudi Shiite Muslim cleric. The newly concluded Defense Pact serves the signatories different purposes, allowing them, for example, to benefit from each other's financial, technological, and industrial strengths in areas such as enhancement of their military-industrial complexes, while tiptoeing around being sucked into conflicts they would prefer to avoid. Officially, Saudi, Turkish, and Pakistani officials stress that the pact does not target any country specifically and identify Israel rather than Iran or the Houthis as the region's primary destabilizer. In practice, the opposite may be true, particularly for Saudi Arabia. The defense pact fits Saudi Arabia's recent, more assertive strategy aimed at turning the tables on Iran. Its purpose is unambiguous as far as the Saudis are concerned. The alliance tips the balance of power against Iran. Turkey and Pakistan have become confrontation states rather than onlookers, a force with strategic depth, greater military capabilities, 400 million people, 4 times that of Iran, and more than 1,400 kilometers of land borders overlooking Iran, said Abdurrahman al-Rashid, an influential Saudi columnist who hears close to the more hawkish voices in official Saudi thinking. The Riyadh-Ankara-Islamabad alliance aims to create a balance that deters Iran from thinking about advancing towards the Gulf region, as well as targeting Jordan, Syria, and Yemen. Expanding the scope of the war will cost Iran's leadership dearly, Mr. al-Rashid added. Mr. al-Rashid's reading of the Defense Pact takes on greater significance as U.S. President Donald Trump shifts from military to economic pressure in his attempt to force Iran to sue for peace on his terms. In doing so, Mr. Trump has turned the war with Iran into a battle of wills that will be decided by who has the longer breath and the greater ability to absorb pain. So far, Mr. Trump's assumption has proven wrong that it is only a matter of time before Iran crumbles, given the desperate state of its economy as the result of decades of sanctions, 6 months of on and off war, mismanagement, and corruption. So has the notion that the war has left Iran defenseless, with the destruction of its conventional navy, air defenses, and air force, and the depletion of its missile and drone stockpiles. If anything, the war's impact on military capabilities is a knife that cuts both ways. The war with Iran has reduced the United States' arsenal of premier offensive and defensive weapons to alarmingly low levels, leaving Mr. Trump with limited choices. Mr. Trump's limited choices are one factor reinforcing Iran's conviction that time is on its side. So are midterm elections in November, in which the president's Republican Party is fighting to retain control of the U.S. Congress amid widespread public opposition to the war. Iran may also be counting on the fact that so far relatively muted oil price hikes because of the war are no guarantee that more devastating increases do not loom large the longer the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for all practical purposes. Scholars Jason Bordoff and Megan O'Sullivan warn the cushions that absorbed this shock, drawn down inventories, bypassed pipelines, and a record release of emergency stocks are now threadbare, and a second phase of the crisis could prove far more damaging than the first. At first glance, Mr. Bordoff and Mrs. O'Sullivan's argument appears to reinforce Iran in its belief that inflicting ever more pain on the Gulf states, the international community, and global energy markets will ultimately turn the tables on Mr. Trump and force him to back down. The flaw in Iran's thinking may be that there is a flip side to the scholar's warning. Mrs. O'Sullivan noted in an email that the so far muted response to the war by global energy markets masked a deeply uneven distribution of pain. Poorer, import-dependent countries across Asia and the developing world bore the brunt through rationing and shortages, while the United States and China emerged more insulated. That insulation is quietly redrawing the balance of power. Energy shocks once disciplined the strong. They now increasingly punish the vulnerable and spare the powerful, which gives a superpower fewer reasons for restraint, Mrs. O'Sullivan concluded. The scholar's analysis puts Mr. al-Rashid's optimism about the impact of the Saudi-Pakistani-Turkish Defense Pact into perspective. Moreover, Mr. al-Rashid's optimism has yet to be tested. For all practical purposes, the pact expands a bilateral Saudi-Pakistani defense agreement signed last year to include Turkey. Under the original bilateral agreement, Pakistan deployed troops, air defense systems, and fighter jets to bases in the kingdom, close to the Saudi-Yemeni border. Yet, in an indication of the agreement's limitations, the Pakistanis are not expected to participate in operations on the Yemeni side of the border. The fact of the matter is that Turkey and Pakistan may not share Saudi Arabia's primary focus on Iran. More likely is they will tread cautiously regarding any direct confrontation with Iran. Gas imports from Iran accounted for up to 13% of Turkey's energy mix under a 25-year agreement that expires this year. Both Turkey and Iran have been conspicuously silent about a possible renewal of the agreement. Moreover, the land borders shared by Turkey, Pakistan, and Iran, which Mr. al-Rashid highlighted as an asset, could prove to be a double-edged sword. Shiite Muslims account for a quarter of Pakistan's population. Baloch militants seeking greater autonomy, if not independence, straddle the 909-kilometer-long border that separates Pakistan's province of Balochistan from Iran's Sistan and Baluchistan. The militants intermittently attack targets in Iran from Pakistani territory. Finally, Turkey and Pakistan, like Iraq, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, are equally unlikely to close their ports to Iranian shipping and land borders with Iran to accommodate Mr. Trump's most recent focus on economic rather than military pressure to force the Islamic Republic to return to the negotiating table on his terms. Iran's neighbors will not take that step so long as their diplomatic outreach and economic engagements continue to offer a means of managing the insecurity created by the Trump administration's oscillation between calls for a deal and threats of catastrophic airstrikes, said Iran scholar Esfandiar Batman Khelij. Thank you for watching or listening to The Turbulent World. I'm honored that you spend time with my work, given that we live in a world of information overload, in which time and attention come at a premium. The Turbulent World offers in-depth, independent, evidence-based, and original geopolitical analysis of the Middle East, the Muslim world, and the rise of civilizational leaders that goes beyond what mainstream media offer. Paid subscribers make the Turbulent World possible. They have full access to all postings, podcasts, and videos, as well as the newsletter's multi-year archive. They can post comments and get one-on-one briefings on demand. Please consider becoming a paid subscriber. This is as good a time as any other to subscribe. You can do so by going to jamesmdorsey.substack.com. Thank you, best wishes, and see you soon.